Hello there, welcome along to Max Your T, episode 6. I'm Teddy Draper, a sports broadcaster in the UK, but more importantly, he's my bro, Dr. Max Draper, who is a general practitioner and a testosterone consultant in the UK. Max, how are you feeling? How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Teddy. How are you getting on?
Yeah, pretty well, thank you. Pretty well. This is an interesting one because I'm a qualified personal trainer as well as a sports broadcaster. I think there's a lot of information out there about exercise and testosterone, particularly bouncing around the internet at the moment in the electronic superhighway age. First and foremost, in terms of generating, maintaining testosterone, restoring testosterone, maybe, how important is exercise?
I would say it was really important, but I wouldn't suggest it was for the reasons that you necessarily see online, because what people often quote, isn't it? This sort of, if you lift weights for 45 minutes, then you're going to get this big surge of testosterone, and that's going to sort you out, and that's going to make you build loads of muscle. But I think in reality, it's more because exercise fits into a healthy plan to stay healthy, stay hormonally healthy, rather than it just being this surge that we tend to see after certain forms of exercise.
So that surge is not significant in your overall level of testosterone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a temporary thing. It's almost a response to certain types of training. So like weightlifting, I think HIIT exercise tends to see a bit of a surge afterwards as well. But in reality, that it's not that significant in terms of your overall physiology, your day-to-day health.
Yeah.
So it's more important, like you're doing with your PT work, it's more important that exercise is part of your long-term health plans. It's not just, oh, I'm chasing this slight surge in testosterone following it. It's more about, well, we know that it's healthy for us. We know for loads of reasons it's important to do both resistance and aerobic training.
And we talked about in the previous episode, in fact, in terms of the prevalence of low testosterone in society and how testosterone levels across the board have dropped in men, particularly in the UK and the Western world in the past 20, 30, 40 years. Where does, in terms of maintaining your testosterone level, where does exercise for you sit in regard to the other pillars of sleep and nutrition in maintaining your T levels?
I think, yeah, I would put them all on fairly equal setting, but the main one, the top one that is the priority is maintaining a fairly lean physique. So exercise obviously comes into that. If you look at the data on diets and success of forming new habits, eating healthily, exercise for various reasons, is one arm of that. So you look at the diet, the nutrition, obviously it's all about calories in, calories out, but exercise is significant for lots of reasons. Insulin resistance is huge in the field of testosterone. So, if you can keep and maintain a good muscle mass, well, you've almost got like a reserve there for your sugar, if you put it that way. It's kind of like, it's going to help to avoid you developing insulin resistance type 2 diabetes. So those two, insulin resistance type 2 diabetes crush testosterone levels. Put it simply, it's kind of like, if you want to maintain healthy hormones, metabolic health is so significant. And metabolic health includes, insulin, includes all sorts of other factors in our body. And so, yeah, it does come up there. It's I would say that the leanness, if you want to kind of, rank things, and you look at the decline in society in terms of hormones, you've got to put obesity at the top, really. There's loads of other factors. We've spoken before about environmental factors, endocrine disrupting chemicals that we're all being exposed to. And I always say, my patients aren't suffering from low testosterone because they're obese and inactive. A lot of my guys are already doing all the right stuff. So there's something else going on there, and it can be an underlying health condition, or it may be these chemicals we're exposed to. But if you want to rank, how do I maintain healthy hormones? You've got to put that sort of lean body mass at the top, or at least, primary goal.
It's an interesting debate around obesity. Where do you stand? Because the literature says in terms of sports science that actually obese people who exercise can be fitter cardiovascularly, can have more functional strength than people who are sedentary, but have a lower body fat percentage by virtue of maybe eating less, just being more active around their daily life, but they're not doing sort of strenuous exercise per se. Where does that fit with testosterone? Would an obese person who exercises be better off than an obese person who's not exercising, for example, in terms of testosterone?
Yeah, I when you're talking about big studies as well, you've got to look at how are they accumulating this data and what measurements are they using. For example, if they're using BMI, we know that BMI is quite a limited um, measurement because it doesn't take into account sort of build, muscle mass, all of that stuff. And then you've got to look at the fact that there is this group of people who just don't carry a lot of subcutaneous fat, but they store it internally, which is kind of the worst type of fat. So it's almost like Dr. Peter Attia, he's this health span longevity guy in the States, and he's written a book and things like that on all of this stuff. And what he describes it as is you've got a bathtub, and the fat that's under your skin, is primarily not as active hormonally as the fat that's elsewhere in our body. So your bathtub's filling up, and that's the fat under your skin. It doesn't really do anything major until the bathtub's full and you start putting the fat elsewhere. That's when the water starts spilling out of the bath and ruining your bathroom. So it's this idea that, yeah, the problem with those studies is if you're looking, for example, at BMI, it doesn't tell you what's going on internally. Are they laying down fat around their liver, their organs? Are they metabolically even worse off than people who have more fat under their skin? And that's a lot of that's genetic. A lot of that can be how much fat do you lay down under your skin before it starts going where it shouldn't be. So I think the studies can be difficult to kind of attribute to the individual person because there's a lot of confounding factors, or at least how you're measuring what you're looking for. I think ultimately most research would suggest that, being, and again, there's genetics involved in this, but somewhere in the region of maybe 10 to 18% body fat is ideal. I use body fat because I just don't think BMI is the most accurate.
Yeah. So
scale to use.
composition's key.
Yeah. I think it's more significant, sorry, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
some of these guys in America, when they're really going into detail, they do like DEXA scans. And you can argue with how accurate DEXA scans even are. But, they look at DEXA scan and then they work out their visceral body fat percentages. So how much is around your actual organs? And obviously that's a big important marker. So yeah, I mean, it's this healthy at any sizes thing as well, isn't it? Which can be
some people, and some people will maintain that being heavy, whether it's muscle or fat, is unhealthy in the sense of carrying a burden upon your system, whether it's your cardiovascular system or your joints, whatever it might be. That there's actually a toll that you take. Even there may be you look at body mass index, there may be in terms of where you score on that, maybe above 30, that might be the crunch area for anything like that. Whether you're a huge bodybuilder or whether you're obese, clearly people would argue that the bodybuilder is healthier per se, depending on what exogenous substances they might or might not take. So it's an interesting topic, that one, isn't it? And I suppose obesity, if that's key for testosterone and hormonal level, then losing weight is key, because what people would say, actually, it might be a more active daily life rather than an intense exercise program like you talked about, resistance training and hit high intensity interval training, because those can be associated with overcompensation in terms of caloric balance, which is you sit on the couch afterwards and you overeat. That there's a sense that could be a factor in weight loss. So if weight loss is key, maybe not intense exercise for your hormones.
Yeah, there's this sort of non-exercise activity thermogenesis that tends to go up. Your body almost reacts to intense exercise and tries to claw back a bit of the calories, doesn't it? And some people suffer from really heavy hunger after, intense exercise. I think it comes down to a lot of willpower and nutritional information. The exercise is kind of like part of the health process, isn't it? I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who should say that you should just be sedentary, irrespective of what you're eating, because muscle mass, especially as we get older, is such a significant health benefit. We lose muscle as we get older, particularly over the age of 50, 60. And that's associated with so much bad health outcomes. So if you can, my patients, I'm really keen to recommend weight training, or at least some form of resistance training, not necessarily just for that metabolic health benefits, but more because we know as we get older, we start to lose it. You know, in your 20s, you can get away with much more than you can in your 40s in terms of maintaining your muscle mass, particularly much more than you can get away in your 60s, where your 60s is kind of like if you're bedbound for a couple of weeks following an operation, you're going to lose a lot more than a 20-year-old who had the same operation and was bedbound for a couple of weeks. So my opinion on resistance training is um, it's just part of a health and longevity strategy rather than purely for hormonal benefit, I would say.
What type of exercise do you recommend? Do you recommend resistance training? What about cardiovascular?
Yeah, so I tend to go off the idea of resistance training to maintain good muscle mass or build muscle mass. Particularly when you go on TRT, you're going to get these sort of, you know, slight shunt towards anabolism, so gaining muscle, which is good. It's healthy, and yeah, some form of, you know, cardio. It doesn't have to be high intensity. I don't. I quite like, you know, for example, for me, I do weights maybe 3-4 times a week, and I go for a jog 2-3 times a week. And it's kind of, it's not sprints, but you know, that's just the way I like to do it. Something that as well is most important is they're going to stick to, because ultimately, with all the best will and intentions in the world, if they don't stick to it, it's pointless, isn't it? You know this in your PT world. It's kind of like you can do the best plan ever, which hits every single health outcome. You know, it makes them gain muscle, it makes them, you
Yeah.
know, healthier, lose fat. But if they're not going to do it, then it's pointless.
But if they don't like a gym, going to a gym, then revolving a plan around weightlifting in a gym is difficult. You have to sort of think outside the box in terms of, could be body weight stuff at home. For a lot of people who are relatively sedentary, that can generate muscle in itself, and then could be buy one kettlebell, have it at home. There's options, isn't there? If you're not a gym buddy.
Yeah. You get the most from going from nothing to something as well, don't you? That's the thing with all these, you know, the information out there is you get the most from being sedentary to doing something. And that can be, you know, an hour and a half a week total, or an hour a week total.
Psychological factors interesting, because you sort of debunk the myth, I suppose, that weightlifting is associated with a kind of high level general testosterone level in your system. But I wonder, psychologically, is that connection important for people in terms of exercise, that they associate weightlifting? It's almost an endorphin rush, that they feel like the testosterone might be boosted. They feel, for men, more masculine perhaps doing that. Is that involved in some sort of psychophysiological benefit?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, I think if you can get into that habit of seeking that sort of post-exercise high that we all know when you've done a good workout or you've gone for a nice jog in the countryside or something. I think if you can get into the habit almost of, I wouldn't say addictive, but I think you miss it when you're not doing it. That's what you kind of want to get to, isn't it? You miss that post-exercise high that you get. So you know, there's a balance between obsession, addiction, and just healthy habit forming. But I think if you can like strike a nice balance there, where yeah, you do look for that post-exercise feeling, that whatever it is, whether it's in the endorphins, whether it's this temporary rush of testosterone for some exercise forms. I suppose what I mean when I say that it's a bit of a myth, I think, is that people are selling programs for, you know, this program of exercise will boost your testosterone by 40%. And it's like, well, you'll see a temporary rise after you exercise of testosterone. But in terms of your, you know, average day-to-day level of hormones, yes, it's important to do exercise for that. But that temporary rise is not what we're after. We're after consistent, healthy hormone levels, which
Yeah,
is,
and I
you know,
just wonder on the psychological stuff, the confidence that might come as well from growing muscle, from feeling stronger, from being able to lift, if it's, you know, even if it's 5 kilograms, 10 pounds, whatever the weight is, and you're then able to double that in time, that there's a boost that will be helpful for your overall life. Because we've talked previously about the psychological symptoms of low testosterone being a sense of depression, often a sense of low motivation. Perhaps there is a thread that connects the two there, and maybe starting small with weightlifting can be something you can incrementally increase, even from a low standpoint, in terms of your energy and confidence.
100%. I think we've spoken about this before, haven't we? About this mental health crises, and it seems to be, you know, and I'm not going against therapy, I'm not going against talking, I'm not going against opening up, but I think that we're missing the exercise aspect to it. You know, there's a lot of evidence base there for the mental health benefits of exercise, whether that be weight training, like we said, aerobic exercise, HIIT, whatever it is. And absolutely, I think there's definitely something to be said for that drive and determination that, say, like a progressive resistance training system can have for people's mental and physical health. It's kind of like, this week I put 2 kilograms more on the bar. It's kind of that positive feedback, isn't it? It's trying to get out of a negative feedback where you just think,
Momentum.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Momentum forming, habit forming, so much significance to our mental and physical health. And I think that's missing. I think that really is not talked about enough in terms of this. We always form wars in society, don't we? It's like war on cancer, war on mental health, war on heart disease, and actually, I think the war on mental health is probably missing that exercise routine in part of it. It's so significant.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely a lot of a truth to that, and just getting active. And on the activity level, what about the location? Indoors, outdoors? What association is there with potentially exercising outdoors? We've touched on vitamin D in the past, haven't we? And other mental factors that can, I guess, infuse your motivational levels in terms of serotonin and other boosting things, and again affect your sleep and your rest, which are connected to exercise and the benefits of exercise.
Yeah, 100%. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it's the circadian rhythm. So if you get as much sunlight or daylight, I should say, or at least enough to kind of tell your body this is daytime, and then when it gets dark, it's nighttime. You've got to improve your sleep pattern, which again is going to be important for your hormonal health. Sleep is massive for. Well, I think you're big into your sleep knowledge, aren't you? In terms of your mental, your physical, muscle gaining, your insulin sensitivity. I know I always bang on about insulin sensitivity, but it's so significant to our health. Sleep does basically everything. It's kind of like, dementia risk if you're lacking sleep, mental health risk if you're lacking sleep, and then physical health risks. So, yeah, the problem is, and I think this comes down to defensive messaging behavior, defensive medicine, is you're scared to say that people should see sunlight in case they get melanoma. It's kind of like you can't recommend anybody to go out in the sun for longer than 10 minutes. Otherwise, it's like, oh my God, that
Well, you can wear sunblock. It's still good for your eyes, isn't it, to get the daylight?
Yeah, it's still good for the circadian sort of system, isn't it? But yeah, I think sunlight. So again, we go back to that decline in testosterone levels throughout the Western world. Part of it will be vitamin D deficiency. Depending on what you read, you can say that 20% of the population is deficient in vitamin D. Some things will say 40 to 50, 60% is deficient in vitamin D. So yeah,
depends on your skin pigmentation and where you live in the world as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I probably make quite a lot of vitamin D pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I probably look at the sun and I'm like full.
In the winter in Newcastle, you're fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I got burnt in the winter in Ledbury, didn't I, in Herefordshire, on a treadmill inside through the windows.
That's good. It's good to have that. Good to have that living in this climate. Yeah, definitely.
But I think again, it comes back to that idea of what are you going to commit to and what do you like doing. For example, I've got a cross trainer in the garage. I hardly ever use it because I prefer to get outside and just run along the streets, run into the local town and things, because that's what I prefer to do. So factor in what you prefer to do and just stick to it.
And people who are really low point through low testosterone, other factors we talked about, depression, struggling to motivate, it could be that you have a lightweight kettlebell, you do a few exercises in your living room, and then you walk to the end of the block and back to get some outdoor light. It could be as simple as that in terms of a starting point.
Yeah. And what I would say is, we always touch on this, is, if you're that low on your hormones where you feel rubbish, how easy is it going to be correct? If it can be corrected, let's put that in there. If it can be corrected through lifestyle, which is not always clear, do you need actually exogenous hormones, so hormones like injections, creams? Because otherwise you're going to really struggle mentally and physically to do what is necessary to get healthier. So I think we always have to add that in, is kind of, if you are low testosterone, then it's easy to say, oh, well, your motivation is going to be low, your energy is going to be low, but you've just got to do a little bit and try and build it up. Well, sometimes that's not possible. And sometimes it's actually a really hard cycle to break. And at the end of the day, sometimes those lifestyle changes won't do diddly squat to your testosterone levels because it could be another problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're at that point.
But in terms of someone who's maybe unfit physically but has
Yeah.
okay testosterone levels, the preservation, that would be a good recipe potentially.
100%. Yeah. Preventative. If you want to, yeah, exactly. If you want to try your best to maintain hormonal health, steps forwards, like you said, baby steps, and then improve it gradually over time.
And you mentioned sleep as well. As working as a sports broadcaster, working shift work where you have 3 a.m. starts and 3 a.m. finishes sometimes. I know sleep's a challenge, but I suppose a final note would be, and we will do special conversations on sleep and nutrition as well, but they're interconnected in the sense, aren't they? We touched upon, if you're looking to build musculature and strength and fitness, sleep and eating whole foods and a decent amount of protein is significant as well.
Yeah. I think those three are the ones you hit on the head there. Again, it's sleep, and that could be anywhere from 6 to 9 hours. I guess it really is individual. Nutrition, we don't eat enough protein in general. And then just, again, trying to avoid processed stuff, trying to eat whole foods, trying to get your healthy fats in there. I think there's been a lot of, it's like the exercise miss with the temporary testosterone boost. I think the nutrition stuff is really weird over the last 30 to 40, 50 years, let's say. When you look back now and you look at the evidence base for, for example, all fats were kind of said to be bad, where actually in reality, probably processed trans, those fats are not very good for us, but healthy fats are significantly needed.
Hormones as well.
Yeah, for hormonal health, for all sorts of aspects of health, cellular health, everything like that. So it's trying to actually debunk some of the myths regarding nutrition. Again, protein is heavily undervalued or heavily under ingested, I should say. Even if you're not a bodybuilder, especially as we get older as well. So it's interesting to actually eke out the actual science rather than the common messages out there, because there is a discrepancy in it. I think the big problem, remember when we were younger, everything went to low fat.
Yeah.
And basically what low fat often meant was low fat but high sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have a crisis in diabetes. And you just think, I wonder how much relevance that has to it. So don't eat fat because it make you fat. And it's like, but this 5 grams of sugar in the yogurt instead, or 10 grams of sugar in the yogurt. It's crazy, really.
And sugar doesn't satiate. That's the big challenge with it in terms of caloric balance, isn't it? Which we're finding, which you're indicating with protein, is it does fill you up, and it may not stop a compulsive eater, but for most of us, if we're full, we won't necessarily keep eating and consuming more calories, which then won't put us in an excess, which then won't lead to fat accumulation, which we talked about at the start. But we'll do a nutrition chat. I think it's very good to keep it interconnected. So final conclusion is move more. Is that is kind of applicable to everyone, or move as much as you can. And final thought as well, we haven't touched upon extreme exercise. How deleterious can that be to hormonal health, testosterone levels?
Yeah, it's about that. I suppose the extreme side of it is about that balance between breakdown and building up. So it's like recovery versus stress. It's so anabolism versus catabolism. I never pronounce those words. So how much are you breaking down? Are you giving yourself time to recover? I'm not a huge fan, and this is not, I'm not having a go at people who do this, but I'm not a huge fan of like marathon running, that sort of thing, like extensive work like that. I think the toll can be quite heavy, both on our sort of hormones perhaps, but as well our joints. So I think there's a balance. Everyone has to find their own balance. And ultimately, if that's what you really like doing, it's certainly better than doing nothing. Absolutely, 100%. And some guys will be built differently as well. So if I go for a marathon jog, anything over 10K, my knees are ruined. Maybe I'm carrying a bit too much mass. But so it's all about finding what works for you. I think intensity has to be balanced with recovery, because if you are constantly putting your body under excessive stress, for example, cortisol is involved with that, everything like that. So any prolonged extensive stress on the body will impact your testosterone levels.
And overtraining can be an issue for people who are very driven, or even athletes and people like that, which could then affect their testosterone levels.
Yeah, I think I found this actually when I went on TRT, was the fact that, prior to testosterone, I was still exercising, I was still lifting weights, but the recovery was very poor. My energy was very poor. My duration of sessions was very bad. And what I found was, within a few months of going on testosterone, all of that had improved. But actually, and that drive had improved as well. I actually, at some points, have had to take a step back and say, actually, I'm feeling a bit sort of, I think if you know what overtraining feels like, you just feel like it
washed out.
Yeah, a bit washed out, but like you've got that adrenaline going. So you
Yeah.
feel it's kind of that balance between, you just feel a little bit edgy, but you want to go back into the gym. So I think it can become quite almost addictive as well. I've forgotten his name now. Dan John. Have you ever seen him? He's an exercise coach.
I've heard the name.
Yeah. And he talks about when he knows when he's overtrained, because when he walks into a room, his family, get out of the room because he's just irritable. He's just feeling.
Well, your resting heart rate can go up, can't it? Sort of muscle ache rather than sort of DOMS. It's a different kind of feel to it.
Yeah. And your sleep can go off. Your sleep can start getting worse. So again, you can get into those kind of vicious cycles where your sort of driving hormones like the cortisol and everything that are raised because you are kind of overdoing it. So the irony of our bodies is that can affect our sleep, so our recovery gets worse. And so it's about striking that balance, and then just having that awareness of, if you are overdoing things, to do maybe an active recovery phase, where you're just going for walks instead of hitting the gym, that sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe a light swim, possibly analogous as well to overworking, that sense that you want to keep going because you're pumped up and the quality of your work might be suffering, and your psychology and your sleep, as you say. So there's probably comparisons there. Max, people can write obviously comments below and questions. I know you'll check those out on the YouTube page, but in terms of other ways of contacting you, following you, what's the best place? Is the Instagram page good?
I would say the Instagram, yeah, Max_your_T, because if I get like DMs, I've had a few off people, well, quite a few actually off people messaging, just seeking out, if I think I might have low testosterone, for example, where do I go? What do I do? And I can kind of point you in the right direction. Again, as well, that idea, if you are approaching your GP, it's good to have an idea of what tests to look for. So absolutely on there. Unless I blow up and have 1 million followers, in which case it's going to be hard. But at the moment, I think I'm all right.
Well, hopefully by the time this video is published, well, I don't know. Hopefully it has for you as your brother.
Yeah.
I hope it does. But also, I suppose, there's that sense they could connect you potentially for private consultations, can't they? If they're able to do that. Yeah,
Alphagenics as well. Obviously, alphagenics.co.uk as well. That's where you can get the whole, breakdown of what they can offer, and that obviously comes through me. So yeah.
Good man. Speak soon, bro. Take care.
Cheers, Teddy. Have a good one.